My name is Laura Bennett. I was 34, in a $14,000 dress. I heard my fiancé through a door that hadn't latched.
I wasn't supposed to be in that hallway.
I went to get my grandmother's pearls myself, because I've never been the kind of woman who sends someone else to fix a problem I could see my best friend of 19 years, still in her maid-of-honor robe, with her hand against my fiancé.
She's never gonna know. She doesn't look at anything unless it's a blueprint.
Laura would probably send you a change order before she'd notice you were gone. I did not scream. I did not drop anything. I stood there in white silk, with my grandmother's pearls still sitting in a velvet pouch, 4 feet away. What neither of them knew, standing in that room, 30 minutes before 300 people were set to watch me marry him, was... Let me tell you how I got here.
My name is Laura Bennett, and I was 34 years old, standing in a church anteroom in a $14,000 dress, when I heard my fiancé's voice through a door that hadn't quite latched. I wasn't supposed to be in that hallway. The bride is supposed to stay hidden until the music starts. But I'd forgotten my grandmother's pearl earrings in my overnight bag, which the coordinator had left in the groom's dressing room by mistake, and I went to get them myself because I have never in my life been the kind of woman who sends someone else to fix a problem I can fix in 90 seconds. The door was open 2 inches. I could see a slice of the room. A garment bag on a hook, a bottle of Macallan somebody had brought for the groomsmen, and my best friend of 19 years, Kayla Renner, still in her maid-of-honor robe, with her hand flat against my fiancé's bare chest. "She's never going to know," Daniel was saying. "She doesn't look at anything unless it's a blueprint." Kayla laughed, the same laugh I'd heard across 1,000 dinner tables, and said, "God, Laura would probably send you a change order before she'd notice you were gone." I did not scream. I did not drop anything. I stood there in white silk with my grandmother's pearls still sitting in a velvet pouch 4 feet away, and I watched the 2 people who were supposed to walk me toward the rest of my life instead. What neither of them knew, standing in that room 30 minutes before 300 people were set to watch me marry him, was that I had already, 6 days earlier, quietly become the majority owner of the company Daniel had spent 4 years telling people he'd built. Let me tell you how I got there. Part 1. How I built myself. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, the daughter of a machinist and a woman who kept the books for 3 different small businesses just to make sure our light stayed on. My mother used to say that nobody was going to hand me anything, so I'd better learn how to build my own handles. I took that literally. I got a degree in civil engineering from Ohio State on a scholarship I fought for with a stack of essays my guidance counselor said were too dry, became a licensed professional engineer at 26, and by 31 I had started my own structural engineering firm, Bennett Structural Group, out of a spare bedroom with 1 drafting laptop and a business card I designed myself at 11 at night. By the time I met Daniel Cross, the firm had 11 employees, a lease on the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse in the design district, and a client list that included 2 hospital renovations and a mixed-use tower going up 6 blocks from where we'd eventually hold our wedding. I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you this because it matters later, and because for most of my adult life, competence was the only love language I fully trusted. If I built something with my own 2 hands, nobody could quietly take it from me by pretending they deserved credit for it. I had one ritual that never moved, no matter what city I was in or what year it was. Every morning, 5:30 a.m., before email, before the day could get its hooks into me, I made a pour-over coffee, slow, by hand. Grounds bloomed for 30 seconds before I poured the rest of the water, and I sat with the first drawings or reports of the day spread across the kitchen counter. It was the only 15 minutes that belonged entirely to me. I did it the morning I signed the lease on my first office. I did it the morning of the day I met Daniel. And I did it, as you'll see, on a morning much later than that too. I met Daniel at a fundraiser for the same children's hospital my firm was helping renovate. He was handsome in the low-effort way some men manage. good jaw, a suit that fit, a habit of remembering the names of waitstaff, which I found charming before I understood it was simply a performance he was good at for anyone who might be useful to him. He told me he ran a marketing consultancy. He told me he'd built it from nothing, just like you, he said, which I liked hearing more than I should have, because nobody had ever put those words next to mine before. I didn't check. I didn't ask for his client roster or his tax returns. I trusted the sentence because I wanted it to be true, and because this is the part I've had to be honest with myself about. I was 32 and tired of being the only serious person in every relationship I'd ever had, and Daniel made being serious feel, for a while, like it wasn't a burden I carried alone. We dated for 2 years. He proposed on the rooftop of the hospital building, my building, technically, the one my firm had structurally certified, with the city lit up behind him, and I remember thinking, this is the version of my life where the hard part is over. I want to be honest about something most of these stories skip over. It was not bad the whole time. If it had been, I'd have left long before I got anywhere near a church. About 8 months before the wedding, we went through a rough stretch. Daniel's consultancy, I'd later learn it employed exactly one full-time person, him, was going through what he called a client dry spell. He started coming home later. He got short with me over things that had never bothered him before, the pour-over ritual included. He once said, not unkindly but not kindly either, "Do you have to do the whole ceremony every morning?" Some of us have actual mornings. I remember setting my mug down very carefully on the counter, the way you set something down when you don't trust your hand not to do something else with it, and I said, "This is 15 minutes, Daniel. I give you the other 23 hours and 45. He apologized. We moved on. Then, for about 10 weeks that spring, things were genuinely good. He got what he told me was a new retainer client, started coming home earlier, planned a surprise weekend in Charleston, wrote me a card that I still have somewhere in a drawer I haven't opened, that said, "You make me want to be someone worth marrying." I remember reading that line on the balcony of a hotel with the harbor smell coming up off the water, and thinking, this is why you don't give up on people during the hard months. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I sat with it for months afterward, turning it over, trying to figure out which version of him was the performance and which was the man. I still don't fully know. I've made peace with not knowing. We picked the venue in April. I paid the deposit, $6,200, because Daniel said his accounts were tied up in receivables. I didn't think twice. I paid for a lot of things without thinking twice, because I had the money and he, as far as I understood it, temporarily didn't. And what kind of person keeps a ledger with the man she's about to marry? I should have kept a ledger. My younger sister, Meg, never liked Daniel. Not in a loud way. Meg isn't loud about anything. She manages payroll for a 140-person manufacturing plant and treats emotional conclusions the way she treats an unreconciled account, which is to say she doesn't reach one until the numbers force her to. But 4 months before the wedding, in February, she called me on a Tuesday night and said, "I need you to not be mad at me for something I already did." She'd been at my place watering my plants while I was at a site inspection in Cincinnati, and Daniel's work laptop had been open on the kitchen table with an email notification visible. Not something she went looking for, she was careful to tell me, just something that was sitting there, glowing, the way things sit there, and glow when they want to be found. It was from a woman named Kayla Renner. My Kayla. The subject line was Hotel Confirmation, Thursday. Meg didn't open it. She just wrote down the sender's name and the date and called me. I won't tell you I confronted him that night. I didn't. I told myself there could be 12 reasonable explanations, and for 2 weeks I looked for them the way an engineer looks for load-bearing evidence before condemning a structure. Carefully, methodically, refusing to conclude anything I couldn't support. What I found instead, over the next several weeks, with Meg's help, and eventually the help of a friend from law school named Priya Nandakumar, was this. For hotel stays at a Marriott property 11 minutes from Kayla's apartment, going back 14 months, the earliest one dated 4 months before Daniel had even proposed to me. Total charged, $2,890, paid from a card linked to an account I didn't know existed, funded in part by $14,000 that had moved out of our joint household account over 10 months, always in amounts just under $1,000, always logged in our shared budgeting app under categories like client dinners and conference travel. Text messages Priya helped me legally and carefully obtain access to once I understood I had every right to review shared devices and accounts registered to our joint household, including one from 3 weeks before the wedding where Kayla wrote, "Are you actually going to go through with marrying her?" And Daniel wrote back, "Her firm just landed the tower contract." I'm not an idiot. That last one is the sentence that changed something in me. Not the affair itself. As much as that hollowed me out, I could imagine, in some dim animal way, being betrayed by desire. What I could not stomach was being betrayed by arithmetic. He wasn't staying for me. He was staying for the balance sheet. That was also the moment I quietly called our attorney. Mine, from before Daniel, a woman named Priya, had actually recommended years earlier for a business matter, and asked her a single question. What does it take, legally and cleanly, to make sure that if I ever needed to, I could walk away from every joint asset without losing what I had built before I met him? If you're just finding this channel, before I tell you what happened next, comment below and let me know what city or country you're watching from. I genuinely love seeing how far these stories travel. And subscribe if you haven't, because tomorrow's story is an even harder one. Here's where it almost fell apart. I decided I wasn't going to confront Daniel the way people confront someone in movies. I am not a person who yells across a room. I wanted proof. I wanted my exit secured. And then I wanted to be the one who chose the moment, not him. 3 weeks before the wedding, I met with Priya and my accountant, and quietly restructured my ownership of Bennett Structural Group, a firm I had, in a moment of romantic optimism 18 months earlier, added Daniel to as a 15% advisory partner, a title that had never meant anything except that it made him feel important at dinner parties, but which under our operating agreement technically entitled him to a payout if we married and later divorced, calculated against the firm's now much higher valuation, including the tower contract. My accountant looked at the number that clause would have cost me and said, quietly, "You need to fix this before Saturday, not after." I filed the amendment to buy back his advisory shares, fully within my rights, since the operating agreement required both partners consent only for a transfer to a third party, not for a repurchase at fair market value, which I paid him for, in full, from my own funds, 6 days before the wedding. It was clean. It was boring. It was the least dramatic thing I've ever done, and it may have been the most important. But 2 days after I filed it, Daniel found the paperwork. I'd left a folder on the kitchen counter, an ordinary mistake, the kind you make when you're exhausted from carrying a secret alone. And he came into my office that night holding it, and for the first time in 2 years, I saw something in his face that wasn't performance. "What is this?" he said. "Not a question. A demand." "It's a buyback of your advisory shares," I said. "You've been fully compensated at fair value. Ask your own attorney if you don't believe mine. You did this behind my back." I looked at him. Really looked, the way you look at a beam you've just realized has been quietly failing under a load it was never rated for. And I said, "I did this the same way you've been doing things behind mine for 14 months, Daniel. I just did it with paperwork instead of a hotel room." For one terrible second, I thought he might tell everyone. I thought he might call the venue, call my mother, call 300 guests and tell them the wedding was off and why, and take that moment away from me too. Make it his story, his timing, his exit. He didn't. I think, in the end, the tower contract was still worth more to him than his pride. He put the folder down, said, "We'll talk after the wedding," and walked out, and I understood in that sentence that he still intended to marry me. That he thought he could have both things. I let him believe that for 6 more days, because I needed those 6 days to finish what I'd started, and because I wanted him to be the one standing in white tie in front of everyone we knew when he finally understood he'd lost. Which brings us back to that hallway, 30 minutes before the ceremony, my grandmother's pearls 4 feet away in a velvet pouch, and Daniel's voice through a door that hadn't quite latched. I didn't walk in loudly. I pushed the door open the rest of the way with 2 fingers, the way you'd check on a room you already knew what was inside. Kayla saw me first. She made a sound I won't try to spell. Daniel turned, and for 1 full second, I counted it later in my head, more times than I'll admit, He looked like a man doing math, trying to figure out how much of this he could still talk his way out of. Laura. This isn't. We were just. Finish the sentence, Daniel, I said. My voice was very even. I have given harder presentations to city planning boards. You were just what? He didn't finish it. Kayla, God help her, tried. It's not what it looks like, she said, which is a sentence I have never once heard be true. I looked at both of them for a moment longer than was comfortable for any of us, and then I did the only thing that felt like mine to do. I turned around, walked back down the hall, and told the wedding coordinator, a woman named Denise who had organized 400 weddings and had clearly, from the look on her face, never once had a bride ask this, that I needed her to gather the immediate family and the wedding party in the vestibule in 10 minutes, before doors opened to guests. I did not scream at that gathering. I did not cry, not there. I stood in my dress, pearls now in my ears because I'd gone back for them on my way out, in front of my parents, Daniel's parents, 6 groomsmen, 5 bridesmaids, and Kayla, still in her robe, mascara starting to go, and I said, there isn't going to be a wedding today. I walked in on Daniel and Kayla 20 minutes ago. I'm not interested in discussing details in front of 300 guests, and I'm not interested in a scene. Denise is going to help me handle the announcement. What I need from the rest of you is to let me leave this building with some dignity, because that's the only thing left today that's actually mine to keep. My father had walked machinist floors his whole life and never once raised his voice at anything that mattered, put his hand on my back and said, we'll walk out together, whenever you're ready. My mother didn't say anything. She just took my veil off my head, herself, gently, the way you take a splint off a bone that had already healed wrong, and folded it over her arm. Daniel tried to follow me into the hallway. Laura, can we please just... I stopped, and I said the only thing I said to him that entire day that I'd actually planned in advance. You spent 14 months deciding I wasn't worth telling the truth to, because you were waiting to see if my company was worth staying for. It is. I am. And neither of those things has ever needed your signature on them. Go find Kayla. I already found what I needed. I walked out the side door of that church in my wedding dress, past a line of cars decorated with white ribbon, and I got into my sister's car instead of the one that was supposed to take me to my reception, and Meg didn't say a word the entire drive. She just reached over at a red light and held my hand. Here is the part nobody puts in a movie, because it isn't cinematic, but it's the part that actually mattered. The following Monday, I did not post anything online. I did not call Daniel's mother to air 14 months of grievances, tempting as it was. I went to my attorney's office at 9 a.m. and I finalized the sale of my house. The one Daniel and I had bought together 18 months earlier, in which I'd put down 80% of the down payment because my credit was better and the mortgage rate was lower on my income alone, by exercising a buyout clause we'd both signed without either of us thinking we'd ever need it. I moved the last of the joint household funds Daniel hadn't already spent into an account with only my name on it, which was Propria, entirely within my legal right as the account's primary holder. I called the venue and formally canceled remaining vendor contracts, ate the non-refundable deposits without complaint, and had the caterer donate the reception food, for 100 plated dinners worth, to a downtown shelter 3 blocks from my office, which felt like the only piece of that day that came out clean. I did not confront Kayla again. I didn't need to. I unfriended her the way you close a file you're never going to reopen, and I let 19 years of friendship end in silence, because some things don't deserve an ending speech. I want to tell you about night 6 months after the wedding that didn't happen, because it's the part of this story I actually think about. Our firm, my firm, fully and only mine again, papers signed, no advisory partner listed anywhere, won a regional award for the hospital renovation project, the same building where Daniel had proposed to me on the roof. The award ceremony was black tie, for 100 people, in a ballroom downtown, and I was seated at the head table because I was accepting the award for lead structural engineer of record. I hadn't known Daniel would be there. It turned out his new consultancy, smaller now, I later learned, funded mostly by a business loan he'd had to take out once my money stopped quietly propping up his lifestyle, had a client on the events committee. He was 3 tables back, in a rented tux, with Kayla on his arm in a green dress I recognized because I'd once helped her pick it out for someone else's wedding. When they called my name to accept the award, I walked to the podium in front of everyone I did business with in that city, took the microphone, and said what I'd actually prepared, which had nothing to do with either of them. This building matters to me because 11 months ago I nearly let someone talk me into believing my work was the backup plan in my own life. It isn't. It never was. Thank you to my team, who never once let me forget that. I didn't look at their table. I didn't need to. Priya, sitting 2 seats down, told me afterward that Daniel had gone very still, and that Kayla had reached for her water glass and hadn't been able to pick it up steady. I believe her. But honestly, by then, it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like closing a door I'd already walked through months earlier. The room they were still standing in wasn't one I lived in anymore. It's been a little over a year. I live in a corner unit on the 9th floor of a building my own firm certified the retrofit on, which still makes me smile every time I think about it. Meg comes over most Sunday nights, and we don't talk about Daniel unless I bring him up first, which is rare now. Priya and I still have lunch every few weeks, mostly about business, occasionally about nothing. Every morning, still, at 5:30, I make a pour-over. Same slow bloom, same 30 seconds, same quiet, except now I do it looking out over a skyline with 3 buildings on it that I helped make sure would stand up. Nobody's ever told me to hurry through it since. There's no one in the next room to be irritated by 15 minutes I don't know anyone. I didn't lose myself in that hallway with the door open 2 inches. I think, if anything, that's the morning I finally found the edge of what I would and wouldn't build my life around again. I was never the thing that needed rescuing in that story. I was the foundation the whole time. I just handed the blueprints to someone who never intended to build anything that would last.